So we are definitely living in very interesting times, because this NBA gambling scandal involving Chauncey Billups and just the many others before him and that's going to come afterwards, we're truly seeing how tied up these sports leagues as well as their media partners are into gambling, because the way these things are getting reported, there's a lot more nuance and a lot of things are being left out. As in this segment, we're going to get into the nitty gritty with Chauncey Billups, because he is involved in both indictments from the feds, but one of them in particular does not even involve the NBA, as it involves a couple of mafia ran games. And with all these scandals, there's multiple agendas from different entities. The feds more than likely was probably already looking at this first indictment with Chauncey Billups and these mob games, and they sort of saw a perfect opportunity to tie in the NBA and their involvement with other players fixing games. Now, in the case of Chauncey Billups, the Southern District of New York, they love chasing clout. When they bring up a lot of these cases, we've seen it with P. Diddy, as they try to charge him with the RICO, even though they never really named any other organizations involved. Imagine that, a solo guy getting a RICO all by himself. Makes no sense, but it is what it is. And again, before we get into this segment, let's not forget the feds, the way they introduced all this. They try to make Chauncey Billups almost seem like he was the face, the figurehead of a whole interstate poker gambling ring. Just look at the way the FBI director, Kash Patel, introduced this whole case to the public.
Good morning. Today we are here in New York to announce a historic arrest across a wide-sweeping criminal enterprise that envelops both the NBA and La Casa Nostra. But as you now know, individuals such as Chauncey Billups, Damon Jones, and Terry Rozier were taken into custody today, former, current NBA players and coaches. What you don't know is that this is an illegal gambling operation and sports rigging operation that spanned the course of years. The FBI led a coordinated takedown across 11 states to arrest over 30 individuals today responsible for this case, which is very much ongoing. The charges and the arrests that were taken down across this country range from wire fraud, money laundering, extortion, robbery, illegal gambling.
Once again, the feds have to make a splash when announcing this original case. And interesting enough, they're already making plea deals with Chauncey Billups. So how tied in really was he? And don't be shocked if he takes it to trial. And we got to keep in mind the way the media is covering this, while at the same time tossing out gambling ads with the very next breath. A lot of the details in this Chauncey Billups situation is trickling in, but it's not really in the forefront. And once again, stick with me as I lay the nuances before we get into the nitty gritty of this whole indictment involving Chauncey Billups and the mob, as we'll first hear from ESPN's legal analyst as he drops real gems of some of the details that's going on in this case.
Ryan Smith joining us now, ESPN legal analyst. Ryan, what role has the government alleged Billups played in this whole poker scheme?
So they're essentially calling him the face card. And when you think about it, they have this high stakes poker game. The people involved, according to the government, are trying to get these high net worth individuals to come. What's a good way to come? Hey, we got a Hall of Fame NBA guy, Chauncey Billups here. That's why he's the face card. He's the guy who helps bring in, at least according to prosecutors, the victims who they then bilk in these rigged poker games. But that also makes it very interesting as to whether or not he was involved in the scheme, because part of his defense could be, hey, I'm just here playing. I wasn't someone who was in the scheme. But that's the way they're positioning it. He's the face card that brings in the victims so that they could be bilked in the scheme.
The severity of these charges is enormous. Who's representing Chauncey Billups, and what defense can they muster?
He's got some high-powered lawyers. One of his lawyers is Mark McCaskey, and that's the lawyer that represented President Trump.
Very interesting right there. The same lawyer that represented Trump going up against the same district that's charging Chauncey Billups right here. Wow. And once again, that district has shown in the past that they do have agendas. So now that we're hearing more details that Chauncey Billups was used as the face, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he knew what was going on. The burden is really on the feds to prove this, as they did admit that they have 1 terabyte of evidence, which kind of sounds crazy, but at the end of the day, it could just be 1 terabyte of just security footage. Who knows? It's pretty vague. But the way the FBI director, Kash Patel, introduced the whole case to the media, it almost made Chauncey Billups seem like he was a fucking made man.
in a lot of his New York investigations that involved real estate companies and charities. He's also he's the son of the former attorney general. So this is a very high-powered lawyer who is used to big-time cases. And when you have a case like this, 31 defendants, you're one of them. I think it helps to have a well-established, very skilled lawyer like McCaskey is. Now, in terms of defenses, it ends up being interesting. Again, it's early days, so he's going to now get discovery and things like that and see what the government has against him. But one way he could go is to essentially say, I am not a part of the conspiracy. It's like saying, I was present, but I didn't participate. So how does that work? They have to be able to prove that he had knowledge of the conspiracy, that he had intended to fraud people, that he was part of the scheme. But if he just showed up to play cards and they can't prove that he was a part of that, there's not messages or all different kinds of communications about how the scheme works, then he might be able to say, I had nothing to do with this. I just showed up, here I am, and I'm playing. And so that might be a place where he lies in terms of making his defense. But again, it's going to be helpful for him and his defense team to get documents from the government to see what they have on him so they can formulate that. There is a lot of possibility for plea deals in this. In fact, the government's already stepped out and said, hey, we're having discussions with a lot of the defendants. We hope to resolve a lot of these cases before trial.
Very interesting right there. Once again, they might not have shit. And going back to what the legal analyst has said before about Chauncey Billups, he kind of said it in legal terms. I had nothing to do with this, because according to the court language, they're going to have to prove 100% without a doubt that he had intention of defrauding people. So if they don't have any proof in the eyes of the court, he could say that he had nothing to do with it. Even if he had a hint about it, the fact that he's not tied in through the back end and just got a payment for just showing up, shit, in the eyes of the law, he could be innocent.
But plea deals are very tricky. We don't know if they're having these discussions with, say, Chauncey Billups or other of the people that we know in this case. But they're tricky because a lot of times when you start having negotiations or discussions with one group of people, and you got 31 defendants here, the people who come in later, they don't always get the best deal. Right. People who come in earlier, they might get a more favorable circumstance. And then you have to worry about, what are they saying about me? So the plea deal discussions might be interesting here. Again, they're not saying they're having them directly. They're saying they're having discussions. But I wouldn't be surprised if this case ends with some plea deals. And I know prosecutors are trying to resolve some of these cases with some of these defendants.
Now, Chauncey Billups' lawyer is very well connected within that whole kind of industry. He seems like he was born into that position right there, as he does have family members that are tied in. Shit, he represented Donald Trump and they won that case in New York. So, man, the feds definitely have a burden ahead of them to prove that Chauncey Billups, without a shadow of a doubt, was involved in this, aka had intent. So now we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of all this, as Julian Dory has sat down with Jeff Nadeau, a sports bettor who studies the industry and is now presenting the back end as content towards a whole new audience. That's why I said the media landscape is very interesting, because now it gives an avenue for people to tell stories that normally the public would not know. Basically, they can make a whole economy out of their stories. But their sit down was very interesting because they went over the key details of this whole Chauncey Billups situation involving the mob members and what exactly is the makeup of a mob team today. These guys are far younger and don't really necessarily have the same mindset as some of the members that they looked up to from the past. The loyalty is very flexible depending on if guys can make the money or not. The level of the crimes are even more petty, and they're done very, very sloppy. And finally, Jeff Nadeau gives great insight into how the mob members of today, the younger mob members, some of them are kids of made guys, but they're running into a wall because all the underground schemes that they used to run are getting blended with the regulated gambling market, which is much more tightly ran than we expect. All the irregular prop bets are being spotted right away by middlemen companies that work with casinos, and they could easily spot betting patterns, and they notify basically the whole industry. Side note, I've elaborated on this more on the Patreon because it's one of the reasons why ESPN had to separate from the previous gambling sports books that they were working with. ESPN Bet had to dissolve. So there's a lot going on in that gumbo bowl between the underworld of gambling and the various sports leagues that are trying to corporatize that industry to make up for the lack of media revenue that's going to come in the future. That's why I said this is like a big pot of gumbo. There's a lot going on in there.
So I want to make this clear right out of the gate, okay? The mafia for years, and we're talking decades, in New York, in certain businesses, take a tax from everything. And when I say tax, they get a percentage of, and nowadays it's more like kind of seedy business. So like strip clubs, poker games, things of that nature. Back in the day, you know about regular extortion. They were extorting everybody. Now it's more or less, it's kind of a circuit group of people. They run poker, dice. This goes on in New Jersey. This goes on in Staten Island, all the boroughs. And in particular areas in Manhattan, so for instance, Greenwich Village, or one of these games was, that goes to a certain family. And they have representation in that game. He collects, he gets a piece of every game. So like the fact that the mob's involved with this is not surprising. If you're playing at a game underground in New York, it's 99% sure there's some connection to the mob, whether it be an associate, there might be made guys in these clubs, and then there's always going to be that captain or made guy that is kind of the overseer of making sure everything runs, everybody gets paid.
That was one of the things, though, in the indictment that I don't want to say it surprised me, but it seemed like a little convoluted in that the way they wrote it up, and maybe they were just a little careless with how they wrote it in here, it seemed like games were being protected at the same time by multiple families. So,
well, yeah. So, and that's the thing. Like, I think there's this premonition. I've heard it on, some. I'll say this real clear. In this case and in the other case, some of the worst reporting you'll ever see went on with this case. I mean, it's just salacious. It's, bringing up it's cool to say Chauncey Billups, it was with the mob. Chauncey Billups, I could almost assuredly tell you, has never spoken to a mobster in his life. And if he did, he didn't know.
He didn't know it, right?
Now, it looks like Jeff Nadeau picked up on the same bullshit I did. The Southern District of New York, man. I'm telling you, these guys love to chase clout. P. Diddy and a Rico, but yet they never named the organization. They've been on this crusade for a while, and they try to make an example out of Trump. Unfortunately for them, that shit did not work.
He took a picture with somebody or something, but like, it's not like they were calling Chauncey on the phone and said, "Hey bro, you showing up tonight?" Like, it didn't work like that. But yeah, I mean, these indictments can be a little like confusing because you first have to understand the background of the games and how they work. And these families work together. There's this thought in the media that they don't like each other, they're rivals. These families, they all know each other. Most of them are cool. These families aren't fighting in the street. They all know each other. They all work together. Everybody gets a piece. So like in one of the games, the Gambino and Genovese families both had representation in the game, allegedly. And like I said, if you're in the poker, underground poker scene, these games, they're, like I said, they're all over the tri-state.
Facts. I've been to one, matter of fact. I definitely have been to one out in Valley Stream in Long Island. And it was definitely, let's just say you got that vibe when you got in there, but they had a whole setup, I tell you that. They even had a section where you could mess with either the Xbox or the PlayStation. You could run FIFA games for money. I mean, just everything. You could play darts for money, anything. Shit, they even had a bar, some fine-ass ladies to give you drinks. The whole setup was there.
Everywhere. So yeah, I think kind of understanding that side, and that the people that are also involved in this are going to be some of these people are some of the biggest cheaters in the gambling world, whether it be sports betting, poker.
Like who?
For instance, Anwar Awadi is a known scam artist. He's one of the biggest cheat scam artists in America.
Also known as Flappy.
Correct.
Got it.
And Anwar's name popped up in the Jonte Porter case.
Oh,
I think the biggest thing you have to realize about the NBA people, whether it's Jonte, Chauncey, Terry Rozier, and Damon Jones, these are all people that gamble regularly. Some of these people, Chauncey Billups has been playing poker for a long time.
Just poker, or is he known
other
to do
games?
A lot of other things too?
Like, I'm not going to say he's played poker his whole life, but like I've heard his name over the last 5-ish years.
In what context? Just playing poker, or
no?
Oh.
If you really know, and if you're out in Vegas, LA, really wherever, I have heard that Chauncey and another individual who is not in this indictment, but I've talked about, is a prominent NBA player. I don't mind saying his name either. They scam games. They've been scamming games for years.
We gonna get a name?
Paul Pierce. Everybody knows that.
My man's doing red pill videos and scamming. Sheesh.
When you say the cheating, because we're going to get to specifically what they did and they're accused of in this indictment, but when you're talking in that context of like Chauncey and Paul and what you had heard, are we talking regular old school like chip stacking and signaling, or are they actually using some of the things?
No, they're using, like, there could be some of that stuff, but they're using these shuffling machines, glasses. And I'm not going to say that they're like, what's interesting here is like, and this is why these indictments overlap in a way, because if you read the sports betting indictment, there's a person in it called Eric Ernest. He's also in this indictment. He's in both. Eric Ernest, from what I've been told, is a close friend of Chauncey's. Eric is pretty tied into the gambling, poker communities, everything. Has all sorts of contacts. And I think that's kind of where some of the bridging of this goes, as far as, you know, they know each other through poker and somebody knows somebody else and they say, well, maybe he'd be willing to give us something, you know?
Now, another interesting thing about Eric Ernest, allegedly when Chauncey Billups was tanking and they knew they was going to sit down Damian Lillard, apparently Billups gave him information. Then he went to Terry Rozier's friend, Marvis Farley, and gave the inside information. Then they made bets. That's what's on the paperwork. So Jeff Nadeau is right. The two indictments, they overlap. But Chauncey Billups is in both indictments. One of them involves a mob with the underground poker games, and the second one is tagged along with Terry Rozier and others who kind of gave away inside information, Damian Jones too. So it's two separate cases, but they do overlap. And just to put everything into focus in this segment, we're only focusing on the first indictment with Chauncey Billups and the mob.
But with poker, yeah, Chauncey's played in games. I talked to one person that told me, and in this indictment, there's a reference of a game in April 2019.
In Vegas.
Correct. And this has come out publicly in the media. I posted it, and Pablo Torre then posted a day or so later that Kevin Garnett played in that game. I think he played for about an hour, and I was told that he left.
Did he win or lose?
That I don't know. But my source told me that Chauncey, quote, cleaned up in that game. Now, the same source also told me that when he had met Chauncey, he knew that he had played, but he wasn't really good at it. And then he just all of a sudden became really good at it quick, you know? And it didn't make a lot of sense. And like the stuff I say about Paul Pierce, like, it's not a secret. Paul Pierce plays poker. He was in the ESPN when he was fired from ESPN with the
strip club.
Yeah. He was playing a poker game. You know, he's played on stream poker. You know, when he plays poker, he gets drunk and acts crazy.
And there's nothing wrong with playing poker. It's a matter of if you're cheating people.
Right.
If that is the case.
And there's this thought like, well, these guys make so much money. Like, why do any of this? And it's such a ridiculous point because it's like everybody gambles. I mean, Dana White is a billionaire and gambles, you know?
And that's another mix-up with this whole indictment with Chauncey Billups, because it was alleged he was only gambling tens of thousands of dollars. It wasn't really like hundreds of thousands he was earning or even millions. So the likeliness of him being involved in running an interstate underground poker scheme, this shit is unlikely. And Billups has earned over $100 million throughout his whole career, while current day he was earning $4 million a year for being the coach of the Portland Trailblazers. So it doesn't really make any sense he would risk so much just for a couple of thousands of dollars. That's another trick with the mobsters telling the stories of, yeah, guys are getting in debt, and then we have them in a position where they're willing to risk a few things to pay off that debt. In Chauncey Billups' situation, that's going to be very, very hard to explain.
It's like everybody gambles. I mean, Dana White is a billionaire and gambles. You know, some of the richest people on earth love to gamble. I think in terms of these athletes, it started as they love to do it. And when you really play poker, when you really bet on sports, most of these people are degenerate gamblers.
Yeah.
I mean, they just get in too deep. Let's just take it. And let's say he makes $5 million a year. okay? You and I hear that, Danny hears that, any guy on the street hears that. That's a lot of money.
Right.
But think about this. He makes $5 million a year. He really only makes about 2.5. He's got a wife, he's got kids, he's got to put them through school, he's got family, he lives in probably a really nice home. Like, before you know it, like, it's a good amount of money, but when you're gambling some of the levels that he is, he's not gambling, Julian, for $5, $10 on the street. He's playing games with 50, 100, 200,000 on the table. You get in quick, you lose. I mean, 200,000 is a lot of money.
But that's not what just to be clear, like I hear you, and it sounds like that might be a pattern that he has. What's so fascinating about his winnings, as it's reported in this indictment, though, is that we're talking about, 10 grand here, 15 grand.
Facts. The winnings are too small. That's where this shit don't add up. Hey, the feds definitely have the burden of proof.
For a guy that's making, we did pull it up, $4.7 million in salary and made, I believe, over $100 million in his NBA.
But remember, in this indictment, the poker indictment, he's only listed as playing in one game in this indictment. And that's the one I told you
in
about. 2019, correct.
Yeah, you were saying he was done. You tweeted this the other day. They did Chauncey Billups dirty with how they marketed this.
Well, they did, because they marketed it that he was in New York playing in mafia-run games.
Right.
Facts. This has been marketed this exact way. And it was such a splash, but we got barely any follow-up. There was definitely follow-up, but that previous soundbite I played of the ESPN legal analyst going over the keen details, how many of you saw that come across your timeline? Did that hit your algorithm?
He wasn't. Like I said, I don't believe Chauncey Billups has ever met a mobster. I don't think he ever even played in the games in New York. But this is a nationwide ring of people who go to different cities and run games. So, like, in one game, they're making hundreds of thousands just off the rake. And it's like, that's the ridiculousness of it. And that's, I'm going to guarantee, what some of the old timers in some of these families are saying, what the we had a good thing here.
Yeah.
And that's why, in a way, like I say, the mob and Chauncey kind of got screwed, because one makes the other a lot more salacious, right? If the NBA guys aren't in this is just another indictment.
That's right. No one talks about it.
This has happened 4 or 5 times against the mob.
No one talks about it.
Over the last year.
Yeah.
There was
business expense.
There was one in this state within 3 months ago, but there was no Chauncey Billups or whoever else. So only I heard about it. But this is now a international story on every news station, and every talking head in sports media is talking about it because it's a current NBA coach.
Are they really talking about it? It's pretty much surface level. They don't want to stay too stuck in this whole gambling scandals, because in the very next breath, a lot of these same media entities are promoting and telling you what parlays to pick. Very interesting times that we live in.
It's a current NBA coach. Chauncey's problems are not in this case. They're in the other case. Okay. The fact that you're an open coach in the league currently. He coached the first night of the season just days ago.
Yeah, got indicted the next
And then
morning.
a day later, he's, that's going to ruin his legacy. Like I said, if you're in these circles, like the gambling circle, like, it wasn't overly surprising, at least to the people that I talked to, that Chauncey Billups was involved with this. So, I mean,
they had a feeling.
As far as the poker, one of the reasons that this is, I think, very pervasive now is prop bets. Because when you were fixing like a point spread years ago, you almost had to have 1 or 2 or 3 people involved. I guess you could have one person do it, but a prop is so much easier to rig because it's literally the person controls whether they get enough rebounds or assists or whatever. Now, when we talk about Billups, Chauncey had a friend who I mentioned called Eric Ernest. Now, Eric Ernest's name is involved in both poker and sports betting. He's someone described him to me as like kind of a hustler. He's kind of always out there making money in games. I don't know how he makes a living, but people said that he's a guy that's out there in these games, playing, betting sports, that sort of thing. Billups it's towards the end of the season. The Trailblazers are out of the playoff race, and now we're fighting for spot in the draft lottery. So the worst team has the best chance. He initiates a conversation with Mr. Ernest that certain people aren't going to play. They're going to tank.
Now, this right here is part of the second indictment. So this is the part that involves Damian Jones, Terry Rozier, and Chauncey Billups. And there's mega star athletes, face of the NBA type of players involved. But I went over that in the Patreon. I'll throw the link in the description below because I can't really talk about that in open airwaves.
Blah, 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 blah. And this is, again, an NBA sitting head coach.
It's insane.
Doing this.
Yeah.
Okay, so he then gets this to Ernest. Ernest also goes to Marvis Fairley, who's this sports betting handicapper guy, and they make money off this. So
the idea, though, that a sitting head coach would be involved in fixing their own team's games, especially to the downside, is like worst case scenario.
I will say, and I think it is important, like fix, I think is a bit strong. I think he was giving information that the public was not given as well.
Now, this is another dynamic of the whole NBA being involved in gambling. At the end of this season, around early April, when teams start to tank, end of March, this is where things are going to get real tricky. You know, insider information definitely is being traded, and we could only wonder how long has this truly been going on. For Chauncey Billups in this indictment to be listed as a head coach, to give away information that Dame at the time playing for the Blazers was not going to play because they were tanking to get that lottery pick, it's really going to get tricky for Adam Silver.
So it was insider trading essentially. Fixing would be like, I know what you're saying.
If he takes out a guy who's got 37 points in the fourth quarter with 2 minutes to go because he needs to get some sort of prop bet through and then they lose the game, that's fixing.
I'm just looking out for you. You never know. They take every word you say.
Yeah. But hey, everything today is allegedly.
Sure. And it's
all allegedly.
And it's all in these indictments. I mean, that's the thing about indictments is like, I wish people would just read them. They map out everything, you know, and I think what the problem in this case is, in both these cases, is literally no media read the indictment.
Facts. Why is that? Because they don't want to get into the weeds of it. Why would they? They're earning a shit ton of money through all these sports books. The level of promotion with all these gambling ads is so fucking high that they will look crazy spending even 5-6 minutes telling a story about a scandal involving gambling and then have two things happen. Either they have a gambling banner in the bottom of the screen appear, or in the very next breath mention parlays or just anything having to do with sports books. You know, it doesn't get talked about too much, but since the pandemic, the NBA had to borrow over $800 million. They had a lot of bills to pay, a lot of sports leagues, not just the NBA. And the sentiment around gambling at the time was almost as if it was something to stay away from. And it's funny how quickly the tide has turned, that now all of a sudden it's so acceptable that it's being pushed almost more than McDonald's commercials or just commercials involving food. And we're going to soon find out how much is the gambling money propping up a lot of the media entities current day, as well as the sports leagues going into the future, as their sports rights might not get as much money as they once got before. There's going to be a lot less entities bidding to get these sports games on, and the major tech giants such as Netflix, Apple, and even Amazon to a degree, they're subtly making it known that they're not really interested in grabbing a whole season worth of games. It's almost as if they're just interested in having these leagues as almost an add-on to get more people to sign up for the main part of their business.
Because they're saying a bunch of that just hasn't happened. But
like what?
Well, like again, like that Billups was playing with mobsters. Like
right.
He didn't. And that's the funny thing that I learned about in all the mob stuff I'm doing. Like, I think most Joe Q public, they hear the word mafia and they think like, you know, what the movies have told us, you know, or what the mafia maybe was 50 years ago. The mafia is not the powerful group that it was once.
Right.
But most people assume that it still is. Like if I go out, you know, on the street right now and I ask 5 people, when you hear the word mafia, what do you think of? You know what they're going to say? Generally?
Murder?
No. Tony Soprano.
Oh, you're thinking
Or
like
Vito.
actual-
They're just going to
Yeah.
bring up some fake
Yeah,
movie
yeah,
actor or something, or John Gotti or something like that. I think that the most of America has a lost thought on like what, like even some of the reporting in this, it's like the mafia. It's like I'm trying to point out here is the mafia. They don't have that capability to go to athletes and stuff. They're not doing that. These
Yeah,
are young
you-
people doing this. We talked about the cheating.
Yeah.
How they cheated was they were using rigged shuffling machines. Now, any casino in America, you've played poker, they all have shuffling machines. The thing that makes these different is, think of it like a ghost gun. You have to get parts to assemble a ghost gun. You have to have someone add a switch to it even.
Right.
That has to be done by a person in particular. Not anybody can do that.
Oh shit, they're doing that with shuffling machines?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Think of it also like, if you watch Breaking Bad, right?
I did.
So one of the challenges that Walt and Jesse have early on is they're trying to cook meth by using Sudafed, which is, you have to have a ton of Sudafed.
Right.
And there's now actually a law where, like, I have Zyrtec D. I use it for allergies. You can't buy more than 1 pack of Zyrtec. I don't know if you know that. You have to sign like a paper.
Yeah.
And that protects it against people. They call them Smurfs. They would take Smurfs and send them in the drugstores and buy a bunch of Sudafed. And what Walt and Jesse realize is if they get methylphenidate, I believe it is, they get it in the big drums, they can make all sorts of meth, and it's way easier. But getting that's hard. Same thing with a rigged shuffling machine. You can get a shuffler, but getting someone with a certain set of skills that can shuffle it and rig it, that's another story. And what these guys did, the greed, they didn't even pay for it. They just jammed the guy up and stole it from him. That's your Hobbs Act robbery conspiracy. And not only these geniuses, they use their own cars to do it. You see them on poll cameras, there's toll records, and they set him up. They picked the guy up with the shuffling machine, John Doe 7. He has the shuffling machine in his hands. 2 of the defendants have a car and park, and 2 other defendants come up and rob him with the shuffling machine.
Goes to show you how, once again, as I stated before earlier in this segment, how sloppy these guys are doing things now. You could tell just beyond the loyalty, there's a lot of rule bending. And in a way, it's almost like the mob forgot. Like, we're in the age of technology. There's cameras everywhere. You can't be sending gambling winnings through Zelle or Cash App. A lot of things are really traceable today. Quite a few of these scenarios are included in the paperwork, especially with the payments, the way it was being sent. Cash App and Zelle is fucking crazy.
2 of the defendants have a car and park, and 2 other defendants come up and rob him with the shuffling machine. Yeah, but these are like just young, like game runner cheats that are like stealing shuffling machines. Yeah. And there's also another situation where eventually, so I mentioned there's 2 games. There was one in Greenwich Village, 80 Washington Place, and then there's one up in Midtown. It's Lexington Avenue, 147 Lexington Avenue. It's in Kips Bay. At one point, the mob,
great neighborhoods too.
Yeah, at one point the mob members and associates decide that they're going to combine both of the games. They're going to just have one big game on Lex. To which defendant Awadi says, "Fuck you guys. I'm starting my own game and I'm going to keep it at Washington. And you're not going to do shit about it. And I'm going to have it the same day and time as you." To which the other count of violence comes in, where defendant Gilardo and Ziliani, they're both, one's a mob-made guy, the other's an associate. They run in this house during a game and beat up Awadi. And then Gilardo texts the other co-conspirators and says, "Keep him the fuck away from us. Don't talk to any of him and his people. He's dead to us," basically. So
imagine telling the mob, "Fuck you, I'm doing my own game."
Well, but I think this goes back to what I said earlier, that like, I think some guys just don't really worry about it. And I think that nothing's going to happen. Here's what I'll tell you. And this actually went viral the day this came out. This was said several years ago by a guy, Matt Berkey. He's a poker professional, big poker player.
Oh, I saw this video.
Yeah, Berkey has a podcast, and he talked about years ago. He said it in 2019, I knew this game was no good, and Chauncey was at it. But like I said, the reason why I think Chauncey, at least in the poker stuff, like I've said time and time again, I don't think he ever knew anyone in the mob. He played in a game that some of these defendants kind of worked overlapping on the West Coast, because these guys are all around the country. they reference like the face card thing.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah,
a
can you
face
explain that to me?
Yeah, so a face card was, you know, a member of the cheating team that received some sort of, you know, money from it. He was. Then you have the quarterback, which like directs all the people on what to do. Because when you get these shuffling machines, there's also like stuff under the table that could read the card. That has to be pushed to someone else, and then in turn to someone else. So there's a lot of people that need to be involved. And then Chauncey and Damon Jones were involved in, you know, bringing like Kevin Garnett or
Attracting big fish.
Yeah, right.
Victims.
And the real question is, did Chauncey, when they were sending those signals, was he involved in that? Because if he wasn't, and he just brought in other well-known players just to make the game attractive, you know, how well connected really was he? But then again, some of the poker hands that he was winning didn't even make any sense. He was chasing a straight with a 5-6, different suits, and one of the professional players, he had a Queen Jack matching when the community cards came out. So you know he was betting like crazy, and Billups kept chasing, and for him to get the straight on the last hand, shit's gonna get real tricky when this court case starts up.
That's the thing as well. I mean, I think the big thing that I would include in the poker stuff is there are two separate sets of games. The ones that are controlled by New York and the mob, and then all the other ones.
Yeah.
I think we have to also remember, like, there's a fine line between like playing poker and though taking a rake is illegal. Like, everybody does that.
Yes.
You know, but like where it becomes really scammy is when you're, again, like you just said, you're cheating. Like you're, you know, also like when you play in these games, like I talked to one guy that played at Lex, the Lex game. He said he played there many times. He said, I asked him, I said, so if there are 10 games, how many are being cheated? He said all 10. And what I think what I want to tell the public about these games that's so kind of inviting is these games anybody would want to play at. Like I've always said the funnest thing you can do is play poker. It's so fun.
It's a great game.
And like you're there, and especially if you're winning, it's great. And these games are particularly great because they're in a beautiful home or like apartment. You get escorted up with like a big security guy. Everybody's money's good. It's not like you walk in with 100,000. It's all sent up before you get there.
Right.
You walk up, beautiful table. I mean, you can, any food you want, they'll go get you. Great liquor. There are women there, and I've seen the women that are at these games.
And they do approved.
They're just beautiful.
Yeah.
They're topless. You know, I'm sure if you needed a loan, someone would give it to you. Like it's a nice, inviting type of poker. It's better than going to like a borgata or something.
Yeah.
You know, it's great. And I think that's kind of the inviting. And that's the sad thing I think about this stuff is, like I said before, they didn't need to cheat.
Right.
Like these games are already big enough. I want to again make it clear in this poker indictment, there's only one mention of Mr. Billups playing in one of these games.
2019.
Correct. You know, do I believe and have I heard that he's played poker for years and he's been involved in some tough stuff himself in poker? Yes, but that is not involved in this.
Very interesting. He's only been in one game. So they kind of made him the face of this just over that, which is kind of crazy. But again, with a lot of these mob guys, very similar to the, I guess, famous show The Sopranos, the premise of that whole series was to show how the mob was kind of in a collapse. And even in that series, multiple times, the main character and his associates were considered a glorified crew. Right here, Jeff Nadu gives great insight on how the rules of just loyalty are bent based off of how much money guys could bring in.
And it's as simple as like, if you're on a Fed case and they call you down and you like start making small talk with a cop, like that's no good, you know? But one of them in this case, you know, that's a question. He's involved in this now. And it's like, well, how? Like, why are you dealing with him? But I talked to somebody and they told me, like, nowadays it's as simple as you could be a stone cold rat, but if you can make money for people,
they're letting you around.
nobody cares. Some people, nobody cares.
That's
Now, I'm not saying every one of them guys is like that, because there's still some people in that life that, you know, are dead in the wool gangsters, but are they gonna?
That's
wild.
Yeah, and that's kind of the real concern that I have, is just how as an organization can you continue like that? Because we've seen it just get brittled down through government scrutiny and all that sort of thing. And I think that's another thing, and we've seen that in life in general, where values are gone now.
Now, with those values being bent like that, we also got to ask how easy it is to infiltrate that whole structure, aka the feds, or just any kind of undercover. Ever since law enforcement down in New York City had came up with the RICO, the mob has pretty much had their hands tied. And now we're seeing them bend the rules of loyalty and certain principles according to how much money a guy can bring in. For Chauncey Billups and some of the sit downs he had in these games, you gotta wonder, did he know that he was participating in something like this? And with the way these guys kind of operate, bending the rules, he could have been sitting down in poker games in which the feds were already kind of infiltrating these games without some of these mob members even knowing. But whatever doesn't come out in the wash will definitely come out in the rinse. There's just way too many moving parts to this story.